Good morning and welcome to Blain's Morning Porridge. It's the 18th of March 2026. What matters? Energy security and defence. Let's start off with a quote. Sometimes it's necessary to lose a battle to win a war. The last 2 weeks have been utterly fascinating. Iran increasingly looks a strategic blunder by Trump in the wider global hegemonic struggle between the USA and China. It increases the likelihood of instability, trade and economic disruption, and the threat of kinetic conflict. Boy Scout time. Be prepared. So apologies for the lack of morning porridge yesterday and the slightly late comment this morning. The service is going to be slow in coming days. I've been floored by man flu, and you can probably hear it in my voice. Man flu is the single most destructive force in the universe, and if I could spend the day sleeping it off, I would. But the coughing, the sneezing, and the sinusitis just keeps me awake. I'm turning into a sleep zombie, unable to snooze, but glued to my screens watching the globe in turmoil, or something like that. I'm wondering how I'm going to cope this weekend, the last long ski weekend of the season. At times like this, remember Blain's market mantra number 2. Things are never as bad as we fear, but seldom as good as we hope. Strip out the noise, take a close look at what's broken, and figure out how the shards of the currently splintered markets will come back together again. They always do. At the macro level, we're experiencing another energy shock. It means readjustment, recalibration, pain and tribulation, and markets finding new levels. Inflation looks to be nailed on, and that has massive implications for bond markets and therefore relative pricing across all risk assets. New supply chain instabilities are inevitable as the world adjusts to what has just happened. Consequences. Periods like this are rife with opportunities for traders and nations brave enough to take them, but the current self-inflicted global instability is happening right when leading global long-term chartists predicted it would, and I suggest you check out my great chum David Murren's writings. I'll put his website address up on the website here. He has called it perfectly thus far, predicting how today's tensions would coincide with the 2K, that's the 120-year cycle of hegemonic change, a period that is usually rife with conflict threats as China challenges the USA for global leadership. This is the new reality, global hegemonic change and how that plays out. And my read on how the future develops is very simple. 2 things will be critical in the coming decade: energy security and effective defence. The nations that get these right will likely thrive, able to avoid destabilising conflict through strategic deterrence and growing economies based on resilient energy networks that will enable tech, commerce and industry. At the moment, that's a massive ask for Europe, which is decades away from achieving either. But as for the USA, well, the USA is undoubtedly the strongest military power on the planet, but knowing how to use power is the critical factor. As Iran is demonstrating, it's fine to carry a big stick, but knowing how to use it is the critical thing. Let's take Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese general's most simple concept, as our text this morning. The highest form of generalship is subduing the enemy through strategy, psychologically, and diplomacy rather than direct battle. So what marks would you give Trump's showing in Iran? He's giving a masterclass in swinging the club into his own face. The rest of the world is either horrified or laughing out loud at the trap he's walked into because of the lack of clear strategic thinking or objectives. And if that sounds harsh and unfair, no, it's what's demonstrably happening. My MAGA friends in the US tell me Trump is winning because the Iranians are firing fewer and fewer missiles and drones, and that's because American air power with the Israelis is taking out all the launch vehicles, but that does not make the Strait of Hormuz safe. They are less inclined to distrust Trump's chances in the US midterms, which are just 7 months away. Now, 2 weeks ago, I reminded readers of the Morning Porridge about the Roman triumvir Crassus, who, along with Caesar and Pompey, were the three leaders of Rome before Caesar became the first Caesar. In 53 BC, Crassus calculated that invading Persia would restore his fading political luster. It didn't. He was slain, as were the 7 legions that accompanied him when he ignored the advice of his local allies and led his force into the desert, where they were surrounded by light cavalry. The legions formed a defensive square, but were weakened by a lack of water and Persian archers before they were destroyed by the Persian heavy cataphract heavy cavalry. History does not necessarily repeat, but it does resonate. This time, Trump attacked in support of Israel against the advice of the Gulf states. Then, as now, the alternative to losing was to win by not fighting. Trump attacked, keen to demonstrate his power, expecting vindication and a repeat of his easy Venezuela success. The USA will not be beaten in the field by Iran, but it is still losing the war where it counts, in economics and markets. Its position as global hegemon is being compromised as its credibility is increasingly questioned, and that has massive dollar and treasury implications. Over the last 2 weeks, Trump has demonstrated his unparalleled skills in how not to make friends and influence nations. And while I'm sure the next American president will move heaven, earth, and the satellite sphere to rebuild America's now broken global alliances, the reality today is the US is now military isolated, overstretched, facing logistical bottlenecks, and is fully engaged in the battlefield of its enemy's choosing, the deserts of Iran. China, the challenger, hasn't fired a single bullet. It's sitting, biding its time, watching America empty its arsenal. Now, many folks say that watching Trump is like watching a toddler. I disagree. Don't watch Trump. He's not the cause. He's just a symptom. But be very aware of the tremblers, the little pre-shocks that precede a potential earthquake. That's why listening to the developments at the micro level is so interesting at the moment. Trying to work out how they will tip the balance and affect markets is critical. Energy is the main thing, and the financial beneficiaries of the Iran war seem to be the rogue states, Iran and Russia, from rising prices for their illicit oil exports. There is now talk of Europe reopening energy deals with Russia, which sounds like a ploy to surrender support for Ukraine. Trump claims the US is energy independent, but it is not. Its much vaunted nuclear reactor fleet is dependent on Russian uranium supplies. Stop me if you see a trend, but Russia is supporting Iran drone attacks with tech, supply and targeting. So it's a no shit Sherlock award to the Wall Street Journal for spotting that one in an excellent article this morning. Yet Trump now threatens to abandon NATO in Ukraine. The question is, who's pulling whose strings here? Trump's internal supports are also cracking, and in times of great crisis, great leaders focus on the big picture, while disorganized rebels focus on the little details, which is why I find the reaction to resignation of a single Trump supporter, Joe Kent, nope, I'd never heard of him until yesterday, over the attack on Iran to be interesting and salutary. For the next few days, expect to see the MAGA faithless endlessly debate the treachery of the man and whether the Zionist Israeli cabal have tricked Trump into a misinformed, unwinnable war. American politicians are ravening wolves. Do not mistake them. They will scent weakness, and given the American appetite for conspiracy, fake news, and righteous indignation, It will be fascinating watching how this plays out domestically in coming weeks. But globally, keep an eye on the pulse of markets and make sure you're fully invested in defence and energy. Anyway, I'm out of time this morning. I'm off to get another lemsip, to be honest. My throat's just about gone. Anyway, I'll try and be back later this week with another morning porridge. You can get the morning porridge on www.morningporridge.com, and if you sign up, it'll be delivered to your email every morning. Hopefully back with something else later this week, but in the meantime, I'm off to have a good sneeze.